Hello, Helen here. Thanks for joining me on my channel today. Today's card I'm going to be using another Wplus9 stamp, which I'm going to be watercolouring. I'm also going to do some ink smooshing for a background, and I'm also going to do some stencil glimmer paste. I'm going to do that first. I'm just sticking it down on a board with some painter's tape just to make sure it stays flat, and then I'm putting the stencil down on the bottom part of my card panel and sticking that down with also painter's tape. It's a memory box stencil I'm using called Patterned Heartwood. It's a very detailed stencil, and then I'm going to spread it the Nouveau glimmer paste, the moonstone one that I've used before, spread that with a palette knife. It's very easy to do. Just spread it onto the stencil, spread it around, and then you can scrape the excess off and put it back into your pot. And then I can take the painter's tape off the bottom and very carefully peel the stencil off. I'm not sure whether you can see the detail or not, but it's really beautiful in real life. Just make sure when you've finished doing the stenciling that you clean your palette knife and go away and clean the stencil, because it does set quite hard on the stencil, so you need to make sure you clean it for next time. I'm going to just set it aside now to dry while I get on with my flowers that I'm going to do. Now I'm using Strathmore Bristol smooth watercolour paper to do my painting, and I'm going to do a technique called no line watercolouring, but I'm going to keep it very simple. And just do 2 layers of watercolour. So I'm stamping the images down, the flowers with spun sugar, which is a very pale pink, and the leaves that I'm going to paint with shabby shutters, which is a palish green, but you shouldn't end up seeing much of that left once I finish watercolouring. I wasn't sure how many leaves I was going to do, so I ended up doing quite a few of them, but I didn't use all of them in the end card. And I also tried to do something fancy with the little bud that's in the set and tried to do pink in the centre and green around the outside, but it didn't really work, so I ended up going back and stamping another one over by the flowers with just the shabby shutters green, and that worked fine. Now this is the first time I've had a go at doing this no line watercolouring. The idea is to use a pale colour that you stamp down just so that it gives you a guide of where you're going to paint, and then once you've done your painting you shouldn't really see those lines very much at all. So I'm going to start off smushing some spun sugar onto acrylic block, and I'm going to use that ink to paint just a layer on all the petals. Now I was quite daunted when I started this watercolouring because there is a lot of petals in this flower, and I didn't know whether I was going to be able to do it or not, so I started just doing random flower petals on the flower. The petals that had a curled over piece already drawn on them, I did the pink right up to the fold over part, but where the petals that didn't have any folded over parts of the petal, I ended up leaving a white space around the top and sides of the petal. If you don't do this, you end up just with a big pink blob and you can't see all the individual petals, so it's quite important to save the white space. I hope you can see that on this video. I'm using a damp brush to do this painting. I'm not using a very wet brush at all. I just want a fairly even layer of the spun sugar ink over all the petals. I'm not doing anything fancy, just straight layer of the spun sugar. I think you can see the white space that I was talking about a little bit better in the petal that I just painted there. I'm going to skip bits of this painting because it really was exactly the same for all the different petals, and I don't think you want to watch me doing 20-30 petals, so I'll skip to the next stage. At this point I almost gave up. I didn't really like how it was going, but I ended up persevering, and I'm glad I did, because once I came to do the second layer it looked much better and I was quite happy with it. This is how it looks once the first layer is done. I've put it aside and let it dry for a little bit, and now I'm going to do the second layer. I'm using abandoned coral for that, and I'm going to just smoosh it again on the acrylic block and then paint it, but this time it's a little bit different. I'm going to just be painting around the base of each petal, just a very thin line of the abandoned coral because it's a very strong colour, and then I'm using a wetter paintbrush to pull the colour out from that and reduce the colour until it meets the spun sugar. So I'm kind of trying to blend it a little bit. I'm working my way through each of the petals. At times I've got to dab off the abandoned coral colour and just wet my paintbrush, dry a little bit. I've got a paper towel to the side of where I'm working, and I'm dabbing some of the colour away sometimes if it's too strong, and I'm also blending the spun sugar with the abandoned coral where I can, just to make a nice blend. I'll pop on a little bit of music just while I continue painting the second layer, and I'll meet you back when I'm about to do the flower centre. I'm going to keep the centre of the flower quite simple. It is quite detailed in the stamp, but I'm just going to put a wash of the squeezed lemonade distress ink over the entire centre of the flowers, and then I'm just going to dot in some mustard seed and some fossilised amber distress inks, just little dots, just to try and give a little bit of depth without doing too much detail. Now, apologies for the lighting. We've just got to the shortest day of the year here, and it was very dark this morning when we got up, and usually I do my filming in the mornings before I go to work, so I ended up having to use some lighting this morning because it was just so dark, so it looks a little bit different than the rest of the video. Sorry about that. Now, the leaves I didn't do too much detail to either. I ended up using 3 colours. It was the Shabby Shutters, the Mowed Lawn, and then I used a bit of bundled sage to do the leaves, and I tried to get a little bit of a hint of veining in the leaves as I did them. I left it quite white while I painted in just little dabs of the Mowed Lawn and bundled sage, and then ended up, when it was just dried off a little bit, I went over with a really wet wash of the Shabby Shutters just to take the starkness away of the white, and that's all I did for the leaves. Now, I decided to do some ink smooshing to do a background for the top layer of my card. So what I did was just use the squeezed lemonade and the spun sugar, and I put the stamp pad down on a non-stick mat, spritzed it with some water, and then with my top panel I'm laying it face down into the ink, and I'm smooshing it around a little bit just to try and pick up some of that ink. I go back in and dab some more, then I clean off that colour and do it another time just to get a little bit more ink and a little bit more variation in the colour, and then I'll pop that aside to dry. I've just realised with the video, you must be wondering what's going on with my fingernails. I've got a colour change nail polish on that changes colour from a clear to a sort of purpley punky colour when I'm warm, and at the moment it's looking like my fingers are bleeding because it's just the tips that are red. It looks a little bit strange. So now I'm going to put the card together. I've cut down my stenciled card panel and added that to a card base. I've also cut out all the flowers and leaves. I ended up leaving a bit of white space around the leaves and had planned to do that with the flowers, but because I'd left white spaces around the petals on the flower, it looked a little bit weird, so I ended up cutting it to the pink outline of the flower for both of those flowers. And then I've also, here's my background, inked background that I've just done, and I've ended up using a country stitch scallop die just to make a scalloped edge on an angle with that, which is going to go over my stenciled background. And then I've just got to add my flowers, but before I do that I'll work out where my sentiment's going to go. I'm using the hello sentiment out of another stamp, Wplus9 stamp called A Kind Soul, and I'm just going to put the hello on an angle at the right hand side of the card using the Misty with some VersaFine Onyx black ink. Apologies here, my putting the sentiment on the card was out of camera view. I'm using a little cheap point and click camera to do my videos, which I have right from the beginning when I first started, and it's really difficult because I can't see the viewfinder to know what I'm filming and whether I'm in shot. So we're going to buy a new camera, so hopefully that'll resolve that problem in the near future. So I'm mounting my inked background with craft foam onto and over the stenciled background that I've done, and then all I've got to do is just arrange my flowers. So I'm going to do a mixture of gluing them down with some wet glue and mounting the main central flower with fun foam. Now I do muck around a little bit with getting the positioning right, and I changed my mind a few times till I'm happy with it. And then finally, when I finish that, I'm just going to add some sparkling droplets from Pretty Pink Posh around the card. I think I actually overdid that a little bit, but once I've done that, the card's finished. I hope you like this card. I'll leave you with some photos of the card and some close-ups. Thanks for joining me today. Please give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you haven't already if you want to see more of the videos like this. And I'll see you next time. Have a good week. Bye for now.